So, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast, which we're streaming live as well. We're doing video. We're doing video today, as well as the audio recording that people are going to listen to later. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by Randy. Welcome to the show, Randy. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Simon. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, and Randy's just been sharing that his wife actually got COVID, and with 10 kids to juggle, this is the what do you say? This is the longest time you sat still for.
This is the longest time I've sat still. Simon and I have been struggling with the technical ends in the background. What he doesn't know is I have been thwarting his efforts to delay making progress so we could actually sit here and talk. It's been kind of nice.
Yeah, enjoying the peace and quiet.
Exactly.
So 10 kids, including six adopted kids, and you said between the ages of 6, the youngest at 6 and the oldest at 27. You have you and your wife's hands full.
Yeah, we are not bored, and it's all good. It's a lot of fun. We say 10, but 3 of them are out of the house, and so now you're down to 7. And some are twins. Does that count as 1? No, not really. But it's just life. We love it.
So yeah, the magnificent 7 are at home.
Exactly.
So can you introduce yourself to the viewers and listeners, please?
My wife Kelsey and I live in Kansas City, on the Kansas side. If you're from the States, you understand that most of Kansas City is in Missouri. I can't explain that, but we live on the Kansas side. We have 10 kids. We started adopting after we had 3, and kind of went on an adoption journey. I'm sure we'll talk about it in a little bit. Along the way, we looked around and said, I bet we could help other people do this. And so we started to raise funds to help other people adopt. And that was helpful for people, but we could never quite raise enough money to make it doable for somebody who it was not doable for otherwise. Adoption in the States is very expensive. And so we were giving grants of, $2,000 or $3,000, which were helpful, but it wasn't a game changer for anybody. And about 5 or 6 years ago, we were approached by some folks who said, the way to change the game is to actually run an adoption agency and lower the price and care for people in a good way. And so we dove into that. And so we are now in year 6 of Zoe's House Adoptions, named after our first daughter. And we do primarily infant adoptions, private adoptions, and it's subsidized by donors who help us lower the price and in turn help people adopt, and also are able to take care of birth moms in a way that doesn't treat them like a cost center, because we can care for them in a way that just honors them and honors their journey a little better. So that's our story in a nutshell.
Yeah. Fantastic. I love the way that you're changing the approach on this to broaden it out.
Giving the grants was none of the grants ever helped anybody do what they couldn't have done before. We were defraying the cost of their adoption by 5 or 10%. But it gave people courage, because it gave people the idea that somebody believes in me. And so I know a lot of people that adopted having received a grant that might not have otherwise, but there were still a lot of people who were just never able to raise the, $40,000, $50,000 that it often takes privately to adopt. And so taking another run at it, and what we discovered really was the potential to care for birth moms in a new way that our old approach did not. And so we used to think of how can we serve adoptive families. And that shifted very quickly to how can we serve young women who are making the hardest decision of their life, and yes, adoptive families, but kind of working both sides of the equation.
Yeah. So, how long ago was it that you adopted Zoe?
Zoe would have been 2006. We spent 2005 in Washington, D.C., running an internship for about 70 college-age kids that were focused around the idea of prayer and the issue of pro-life. That's our perspective. We're very pro-life, and that motivated us to care for young women who were in need. While we were standing there on the steps of the Supreme Court, praying silently, it's important to the story, a pro-adoption person came up behind us and yelled, "What are you going to do with these babies if you win? What are you going to do? You don't want these babies any more than we do." And, sometimes your critics say things that make you think. And so we went home and we prayed about it and talked to one another and said, if we're really committed to this idea, then we have to be committed to the idea of bringing children into our home. I want to be part of a solution. I don't want to just be constantly pointing out what's wrong. And so we had talked about adoption over the years. We had 3 biological sons. And what I found is a lot of families talk about adoption and don't know where to go from there. My wife and I joke, a tendency to look around and say, is it dumber than us done this? And you can, back in May 2006, and by October, got a phone call in Las Vegas, and they flew us the next day, and we to bring Zoe home. And
so those tech gremlins are coming at us.
I think
yeah. So we it's holding up okay now. So I heard you say that that sometimes you listen to the critics and that you went home and you prayed, and then it broke up after that. So perhaps you could come back after that then.
Okay, so we listened to our critics, went home, prayed about it. Felt like for our family to really embrace our convictions about the value of life, that we had to open our home and we had to say, okay, then we will care for kids. And so we started in April or May of 2006 filling out paperwork. People say, what does adoption look like? It looks like a lot of paperwork. So we filled out a lot of paperwork. And by October of 2006, they called us and said, there's a little girl in Las Vegas. And we flew to Las Vegas and met Zoe and brought her home. She was 2 days old.
Wow. Fantastic. Yeah, Zoe's one. I've got a cousin called Zoe, actually. So when I did my research on you, that really leapt out Zoe's house.
Zoe means life, and there has never been a more aptly named child. She is full of life.
She's full of life. Yeah. So really big question for you. What have you been your most important, essential learnings since Zoe came home, and since the rest of the kids came home?
A couple of things. Some things have evolved over time. Some things just kind of wake up and realize. One of those is that while your adopted child is fully yours and you are fully theirs, I look at my adopted no differently than I look at my bio kids. It's the same, and it's a divine work that happens in a parent's heart. That said, they also have their own unique story, and you have to give them the freedom to have that. You have to acknowledge that they came into the family through different means, and they may think or look at that differently than you even do as an adoptive parent. And whereas as a parent, sometimes you're tempted to just go, no, just see it this way. You can't do that. You have got to give them room to think it through, and to you got to honor their own feelings about it, even if you feel like those feelings aren't accurate. Feelings are what they are, And with our kids, we have talked about adoption with them. They don't remember not knowing they're adopted. And some of them are more curious than others. And so those that are more curious, we've had more questions to answer. And as an adoptive parent, initially, when you hear those questions, you interpret them as, they're asking these questions, what does this mean about me? What are they looking at me as less than? Are they, am I not meeting some kind of need? Why do they have these? That's not it at all. There are just gaps in their knowledge that they want filled in. That doesn't, it doesn't detract from your parenting. It doesn't detract from your place as a father. They're just things they want to know. When I've got our second and third adoptees were twins. And the twins are very inquisitive, very curious about birth family. And so we have shared everything that we know. They have connected with a biological aunt and uncle who are gold and very safe and good people. And all of that has actually been a positive in our life rather than a distraction or a hindrance. Although, to be fair, going early in our adoption journey as parents, that would have been scary. You want to adopt a child, build a wall, and out of affection and say you're all ours and nothing else, but that's just not quite accurate.
How did you come to that realization, or when did you come to a realization, or what did that realization look like for you, Randy?
Well, our first adoption was a closed adoption. We know very little about that situation. And Zoe has not expressed a lot of curiosity about it. She's on the autism spectrum. And so that may affect a little bit how she thinks about things, but she has made a few remarks, but doesn't have a ton of curiosity about that. However, the others, very curious. And we were very, very fortunate in that we had a warm and healthy matching process and connection. It was fast, but we were able to connect with their birth mom. We were able to connect with her sister and their brother-in-law and just stay in touch. And as the kids got older and they had questions, we're like, well, I actually know who to ask. I know who to go to. Right now, running an adoption agency, we are huge proponents of open adoption. It's just healthier by and large. It's harder at first because, again, the fear of an adoptive parent of what does it mean about me that they want to know about somebody else. But ultimately, it's really much healthier. And so we just kind of grew into that, and fortunately had a fairly smooth transition because of the quality of the people of her family who were so kind to us.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the thing that you opened with, because on that part of the conversation, you said it's divine work in a parent's heart.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's those that are parents, most of us had this unique moment when our biological children were born. That you remember when my oldest son was born and he's handed to me in the hospital, and I look at him and he looks a lot like my dad. And I'm holding a 8-pound version of my father, and there's just no question of what's the lineage on this child, or where did they come from? And you realize that this child is as much you as your arm is. It's you. It's an extension of you. However, I had this legitimate thought. This child is as much as me as my arm. However, at one point he will have different opinions than me, and we will actually argue. I'll be arguing with my arm. That's what it feels like, because they're so much part of me. So when a bio child is born, there's just this divine thing that happens. That same thing can happen in adoption, and is very common. When we first saw Zoe, we walked into a county hospital and walked down a line of about 15 little bassinets. And when we walked in that room, I didn't know which of these was my child. But within 30 seconds, a social worker picked her up and handed her to my wife. Everything changed. That was my daughter. And that was very much our experience. Now, I realize it's not every adoptive family's experience. I've talked to people who said, I brought them home and it did feel different. But over time, particularly people of faith, I think God does something in people's hearts and they become, you don't think of them as adopted in the way that the world thinks of them as adopted. It's just a different, it feels very similar, identical really to the experience.
Yeah. So I think I can take a run at what's going on there. Based on something I heard this morning, which made a lot of sense to me, and something that you just said, and it's about a love is a dissolution of separation. So it's a removal of a barrier. So if we think of this from perhaps in less highfalutin terms, you can draw a line in the sand, right? But the line is made of sand itself.
Yeah.
So there's no separation between you and your kids, and there may be a separation, a difference of opinion, different. There will be. We'll the 7 billion of us on the population on the planet. We all think differently, but underneath it, we're all one.
And that's true of adoptees or bio kids.
Yeah.
One of the things people say when they're flirting with the idea of adoption, I think I want to do that. I don't know. They're concerned, but will child baggage? And I'm thinking, have you looked at your bio kids? You don't. You're having biological kids. You don't know what that child will carry, or what their hangups will be, or what their personality is. It's the dice that we roll. Adoptees sometimes carry extra unique things that need to be addressed, but parenting is just that. It's taking on another person with a will of their own, and it's just true of both bio and adoptees.
So separate thoughts, different thoughts, different opinions, but essentially one. That there's no line. The line in the sand is made of sand. The line in sand is made of sand, and the connection. That's where the connection comes from. So when you said divine work in a parent's heart, I knew we were onto something there that was perhaps because you're a man of faith, you're a pastor, aren't you? So we're coming at this. We're coming at this from quite a profound level.
Yes.
We're not coming at it from a psychological perspective. We've got all these people talking about trauma-informed and all this stuff, all this kind of we seem to have a little bit of an obsession in the adoption world in about trauma, and we're coming at it from a psychological perspective. But when you said the words divine work in a parent's heart, I knew that you were coming at this from a deeper perspective, beneath the psychology.
The Apostle Paul wrote to the church in Rome in the first century that they've received the spirit of adoption, that in order for them to be children of God, there had to be some kind of divine work there, because they were what they were and he is what he is. And so that is reflected in walking this out in our own flesh and adopting children. It's a reflection of that same kind of encounter. Don't carry that too far. I'm making the adoptive parents God. That's not what I'm saying. But the potential for two beings that are very different to have that deep spiritual connection is scriptural and based in an encounter with the divine, not in just mustering it up. Now, that having said that, on the trauma informed, that whole camp, we can't dismiss it either.
No.
Which I felt like doing on the early years. We had 3 boys. We adopted Zoe. Man, we're rocking it. We got this figured out. We should write a book because it's going well. But there are real things to that. But I think you're right. It's the idea that apart from the spiritual side of it, all of that can be very consuming and become the answer for everything. And an adoptee may feel like, if something is wrong, is that because I'm adopted? Maybe, but maybe not. But it becomes an easy scapegoat.
Yeah. I was doing another podcast this morning, and that came up. Is this adoption? Is this about the adoption, or is this human? Is this a human thing, or is this an adoptee thing?
Right.
And I think the impression that I get is that a lot of people spend a lot of time on this, thinking this stuff out. But maybe with 10 kids, you haven't got the time to think that stuff through.
It's funny. Yeah, no, I think I'm very much a pragmatic. It's like, do we have milk? What are, these are the concerns. And it's not that I'm not concerned with those other areas. We don't want to walk them out. Here at the agency, we employ, professional social workers with master's degrees to work on all the, it's real. But it's navigable for the most part. And it's worth the fight. Yeah.
So my approach, I think if I summed it up in four words, would be trauma informed. No, it's 5 words actually. Trauma informed and hope obsessed. So, and for hope, if you're as a man of faith, faith obsessed. No, you wouldn't be faith obsessed, but a believer, right. a believer in divinity, a believer in God, and all that.
Right, and that change is possible, and we are not. Our stories are not fully written yet,
no.
And so there are better chapters to come. And I think that all people, adoptees and non-adoptees, would almost like to say, well, I am what I am, and you have to deal with the mess as it is, because I'm not going to change. And that's not true of any of us either. I don't know about in England, but here in the States, there are a lot of people who are consumed with the Enneagram. And I'm sure, can be very helpful. It's a good way to get to know who you are. But your number does not allow you to respond in ways that are unkind or are unthoughtful for other people. Your number is not an excuse for the rest of your life. And I just think there's a belief that we can change. We can be different people with the power of God working in people's lives.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that from what I can see, the Enneagram is kind of like a personality.
Yeah. I'm not going to dive into it because honestly, you'll be inundated with people saying he wasn't right about that, and it's true. I have mostly observed others who have dove into it, and a lot of them have learned great things about it, and that's super helpful. But I've also seen some who have, their answer for everything is, but I'm a 4. It's like, you're also 30 years old. Move on. Yeah. It becomes an excuse for dysfunction rather than a tool for growth.
Okay, so it's I came across something else similar to that a few years ago, and I totally agree. It's a tool for growth, and it's to inform you how, so that you can change, because it's a personality thing, or it's something about our traits. It's not who we are. If it depends on this identity, this word identity is bandied around, and I think that people use it in all different sorts of ways. So identity is like who we are. All right, so that's my name, is it? Oh no, well, no, because most kids come into this world without a name, right? So we can't be something that we weren't born with, right? Or we look at it from, who we are, it's what we do. Well, we haven't always done it, what we do. So that's not who we are either. That's just something that we do. And then you get something like a test result or a personality profile or some sort of diagnosis, and that's not who we are either, because it's just not. It's who we are is way deeper than that.
And the further question of, can that identity at the deepest core level be changed? And scripturally, we can move from orphan to son or daughter. And if that can happen in our hearts, then it can happen in the family. People will sometimes tell us, oh, wow, you've taken in orphans. No, they had a mom. They were not an orphan. They had a father, and there was never a day that they weren't that. But that identity, can grow and morph. And the final chapter is just not written in our lives.
Yeah, and especially for Scout at 6. I mean,
Scout's a lot of chapters. Scout's a piece of work. The Lord knew if I was going to have a 6-year-old in my mid-50s that he had to be fun, and he is an absolute riot. He's so much fun.
So you mentioned the word baggage earlier on, and baggage in relation to BioKids, right? And I had a guest on the show. I think it's called Holly Ann Petrie. I think from recollection, she's got 9 kids, so you're one ahead of her.
Achiever.
Sorry. So she came up with the title for the podcast discussion that we had, which was unpacking our own baggage as adopted parents. And this, for me, this is an idea that keeps on coming back and back and back. It's about how we are, our grounding, our faith, if we're people of faith, our emotional intelligence, where we're coming from. It's all about us. And it's far more about where we're coming from than what we do. So it's about our identity and ourselves, not about parenting techniques or behavior management protocols, or it's about where we're coming from and us unpacking our own baggage as adopted parents.
Yeah, I mean, I think is true of adoptive or bio parents. You are a product of your upbringing, and so you bring into that relationship the good, the bad, and the ugly, and hopefully you ditch some of the and add some of the good. But nobody gets into life unscathed or unmarked in some way.
Yeah. What have you learned about yourself as a parent over the years, given that if your oldest is 27, this has
we've been at it a while. Yeah.
Half your life.
Yeah. I mean, we've had children as much as we have not. What have I learned about myself? I've learned that the value of saying I'm sorry a little quicker than is normal, which I don't think comes particularly natural to anybody. But if you've ever done something you shouldn't do and waited to say sorry, as opposed to having done it and apologizing more quickly, you realize the quicker apology is a much lower threshold than letting it stew. And so I often think of the different upbringing my younger kids are having than my older kids did. There's 21 years difference. And so my oldest had a young dad. My youngest does not have a young dad. And so I think about that a lot. And the older boys even joke about it. Yeah, it's a whole different rodeo now than it was before. And I think that's true. I think we probably parent with fewer rules, but clearer rules. As opposed to, you have that first one, you read all the books, try and put everything, you just try and control everything. And by the 7th or 8th, you realize there's not a whole lot you can control. Let's pick a few hills you can die on and trust the process. And so I kind of learned to, you just can't control everything like you probably thought you could.
And do you see a lot of parents trying to do that? Control it?
I think particularly younger parents with the first child or even the first 2 children feel under immense pressure to get it perfect. And because a lot of their peers are all Instagramming their perfect life. And so you feel like I have to get everything right for this child. It's virtually impossible. And so you've already set yourself up for failure, even if you haven't failed yet. You're well on your way. And so I think as you grow older, you just realize, okay, no, we're going to get some of these things wrong. I think a lot of first-time parents, young parents, live in just mortal fear. Am I messing up my kid? Because I got the non-organic, non-HMO puree bananas for my 3-month-old instead of, and you learn to give yourself a little grace, and things are recoverable from, and your kid's going to be okay.
Yeah. So what's the key? What's the key or keys to releasing that pressure?
I think when your first and second get a little older and you realize that you did not do it perfectly, like, in the moment you thought you were, but you look back and go, that was a little jacked up. Sorry guys. But it didn't mark them for life. And they're working through it, and they're adults, and parenting little ones, having adult children is actually super helpful for that.
Yeah,
because you see a little bit of the end product of your efforts, and you got to own some of it, and then you go, no, that was your decision. You shouldn't have done that, and it just the bar doesn't feel so high off the ground like it did.
So the word that you used was a realization.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that you realize. It's like an aha moment and an insight, an epiphany. One of those, like a Eureka moment. It's
yeah, I think like I said, even when that first one is born and you look at them and you go, oh, they're like part of me, and cognitively they will make different decisions than you, but you just can't imagine it. And then you raise them and you feel like you did everything right, and then they start making decisions that are not like the decisions, and they're not even right or wrong, they're just different. And you just realize the mystery of someone with a free will just came out of the womb of another person, and I am not fully responsible or even capable of walking everything out with them. All I can do is guide them as best I can. It's like, oh, okay, well then that's my role. My role is not a controller; it's a guide.
Yeah, something pretty profound there. There's something deep there. I'd ponder on that if I were you, listeners. I'm going to ponder on it. It also plays back into something that you said a little while ago about kind of accepting their different perspectives. Mm-hmm. So they said they're part of you, but you value and you expect different perspectives.
Easier with the younger ones, because we've been there before.
Because that's what you've learned along the way.
Yeah, that's what you learn along the way. The first ones, we joke with our older boys. We're very close with our older kids, but we joke. We're like, guys, we were practicing on you. Like, we didn't know what we were doing. You've got to accept that they're going to go routes that you might have chosen. It doesn't mean they're bad. I look at my older boys. I'm proud of all three of them. They've gone out and made their way in the world, and have not always made the choices that I would have made. And in some cases, I've had to look back and go, actually, that was the right call. I think I'd have got that one wrong if you would have done exactly what I wanted you to do. So it's fun. It's fun to see them grow up. It's fun.
So what I'm getting here is a really lovely mix of humor and humility.
Well, I have 10 kids. I have no room for anything other than keeping my head down. Just, we're doing the best we can. I'm sure we're not doing it perfect.
Yeah. Well, that's where the pressure goes, right? That's how you relieve your own pressure.
Yeah.
You're not waiting. We can't wait for somebody else to relieve our pressure for us.
Right. Right.
We're holding the valve on the tire.
We have a joke in our family. We say success through lowered expectations. It's like, if you can't reach the bar, lower the, and that has kind of taken the pressure off us. The family has increased, and it's made for a more fun life with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Has this come through kind of like a necessity thing? Like, as it come through? I don't know why I'm overcooking this, but
you have to adjust expectations when you have, we've had as many as, I'm trying to do at one point 9 in the home. That was the most, kind of by the time, let me think. We had 10 one time. At one point we had all 10 in the house. And there are just certain things you can't do. You can't do anything fast if you're going to do it with everybody. You're just limited, and you accept those limitations, and that's life, and it's fun. And okay, well, we could not show up to that event 15 minutes early, all of us looking stellar. We're lucky we got there. And it just becomes life. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned before we started recording was that there are, did you say there the 6 ethnicities? Was that the word they use?
Yeah. Depending on how you divide it up. Here's the rundown. Our bio kids are all Caucasian. Zoe is African-American Latino. Anna and Mercy are quarter Japanese, quarter Thai, half Caucasian. Creed and Cadence, our other set of twins, are quarter Japanese, quarter Thai, half Puerto Rican. And then Scout, again, is a sibling of the first set of twins, full sibling. So we've got this range of race, and in ways it's a little easier than if there were a white family with one child of a different race, because there is it runs the gamut. When they were little, kids, to joke, would line up by intensity of melatonin. They would look from light to dark. It was a joke to them. It was funny to them. That's not to say that race has never played an issue in life or discussion or things like that, but it probably is easier because none of them feel like the odd man out.
Yeah.
The issue of race is one that people a lot of times are afraid of. In the U.S., sheet that you have to check yes or no on which races you would accept to adopt. And the reason it's horrifying is it makes you come very face to face with the fact that you might feel differently about some races than others. And you may have never ever had that thought before, but suddenly you're saying yes and no, and it's every adoptive parent goes, "Oh, that was hard," because of what it showed. And for me, my concern was not, could I love a child of another race? It was, could I represent that child's culture to them? Could I do them justice? It wasn't about how I felt. It was about, could I do this well? As I, like, in the throes of filling out the paperwork, I look over at my 3 younger sons, my 3 white boys, and they are listening to rap music. I realize I think their culture very well. You know, these are my bio kids, and they're living in a world that I don't fully understand. But I'm in a race to keep up. And I thought, I can probably do this. And so I started reaching out to friends of mine who were adopted into other race families and said, tell me your experience. What was it like? What was hard? What was easy? And I had a really profound conversation with a friend who runs something, Radiance Foundation in Atlanta, Georgia. And he is one of 12. Although he's he's mixed race. You would think he's black. And he was into a family, different races, white parents. And I asked him, I said, Ryan Baumgartner is his name. I said, Ryan, what was that like as a young black man growing up with white parents? And he said, Randy, permanency trumps culture. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, I had the effect of having a permanent family was always more important than fully understanding or relating to other people who might be the same color as I was. Would you trade your family?
Wow.
You can. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there, Andy. But we lost you briefly again.
Okay.
So you were talking about your this friend of yours who's one of 12, a black guy who's raised by white parents, and he said that permanency trumps culture. So the fact that he had a permanent home was more important to him, he felt,
right,
than it being a different culture.
And I don't want to minimize the need for helping my children understand their ethnicity or their race. I don't want to act like it doesn't exist. However, they are a permanent part of our family. And so our family has its own culture. The culture of our family is multiracial. What do we eat? What do we dress? Where do we go? A lot of things. Our family has a unique culture. And so I lost you again. You there?
Yeah, I lost you. Yeah,
Can you hear
it's
me?
very
Okay.
interesting.
I was watching. Okay, I was watching somebody the other day who, because no discussion of all white family with one child of another race. But I was watching a black family the other day that has adopted a very young white boy. And that little white boy culturally sounds black. It's the way he speaks, his mannerisms, and it drives people crazy. People get frustrated with this family. What, you're not raising him to be white. And her argument was, we're raising him to be in our family. And it's for him to act, whatever that means, or to sound isn't a central He's our family. This is what it means to be one of us. And so I would encourage people to not feel the pressure to provide a experience to a child another. You're never going to. But what you can do is fully love them and fully make them a part of your family, and consider your family it's a culture unto itself.
Yeah. I think that is a great place to bring it in, actually, Randy, because the idea of your own family's culture is a huge one, you know, like because that's it, you know, permanency trumps culture. So whilst we've got to help them understand the ethnicities, but the central culture that we're raising them in is the family culture, is our own family culture. Yeah. And the understanding of helping them understand their ethnicity is crucial in preparing them for the world when they leave the home, because that's what a lot of transracial adoptees that I know say, that they feel that their parents kind of did the best that they could, but they didn't see the color, but the rest of the world does see the color. So we clearly have to prepare kids in this way. But the idea of the uniqueness of our family culture, and that should be the most important thing.
There's a story that a pastor friend of mine, John Tyson, tells on to he was training ministers who would stand up for righteousness and stand against the Third Reich. And there was a time when the SS was training just over the hill, not far from where his seminary was. And he took a friend up on the hill so they could see what SS training and look back in the seminary was. And he told his friend, see that? This, meaning the seminary, this has to be stronger than that. Where has got to be stronger for what they're going into. And very much true of adoptive parents, very much true of biological parents. The family unit, this has got to be stronger than that. Otherwise, they will only be affected by that and be around by culture and the identity of the home, the identity of the family. It's got to be stronger than what they'll encounter, no matter what the racial issues are, no matter what the disadvantages or the special needs are. This has got to be stronger than that.
Yeah. I think that's incredible. Yeah. Thank you very much for making time for us today, Randy. It's been great.
It's been great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, listeners. Bye-bye.